Next, allegations around the election expenses of many of our East Midlands MPs, including studio guest Mark Spencer, have been growing for weeks. Police in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire are waiting for more information before deciding whether to investigate claims that expenses for Conservative candidates were not properly registered. The Conservatives hit back, though, this week, claiming that Labour will face the same problems for its campaign. Our political editor Tony Rowe has been taking a closer look.
This is a story which begins in Newark. Questions over hotel expenses for Conservative activists in the 2014 by-election. Not declared properly, it was alleged. Last week, the Conservative Party were taken to court over the non-disclosure of documents. This is the number 4 bus stop in Nottingham. It was a Channel 4 investigation by Michael Crick. He then moved on to the general election and expenses involving battle buses in particular, and the amount of money claimed by activists on those buses for hotel expenses put down as a national expense, even though it should have been put down as a local one. One of those marginal destinations was Broxtowe, the seat of Anna Soubry, the business minister. Now, she has said that unfortunately there was a cock-up, as she puts it, in the claiming of national expenses for hotel costs. She says in a statement that the party has apologised to the Electoral Commission and submitted that expense. So what of Labour? All parties have long held traditions of having battle buses, including for the EU vote. Well, Andrew Bridgen, the Conservative MP for North West Leicestershire, says Labour had battle buses in marginals, so they should be investigated too.
We need to have a robust enforcement of electoral law to give the voting population confidence in our electoral system and let all the parties know exactly where they stand. And it's clear that maybe all the parties have interpreted the rules incorrectly, but they've all interpreted it the same way.
Labour say their spending was within the law and within the rules set out by the Electoral Commission. Breaching election spending limits is a serious offence punishable by imprisonment or a heavy fine. How serious is this? Well, there are 10 police forces on board investigating 30 constituencies.
Well, as you can see, Tony is with us now in the studio. So how much money are we actually talking about here, Tony?
Well, if you put it into context, we're talking about nationally £38,000. In the Midlands, for the seats there, we're talking about £13,000 in hotel accommodation in Tamworth, where they were based 35 people over 10 nights.
That's where they were put up.
So yeah, so it's not huge, and also you need to put it into context with the amount of Conservative spending nationally on the election, where that money should have come from, and they were £3 million underspent.
OK. Well, Mark, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire police have gathered some evidence, but they have told us that they haven't ruled out an investigation, but they're still waiting for more information, still waiting for more evidence from the Electoral Commission before they decide whether to proceed with it. You're reported to be fairly relaxed about this. An investigation's not good news, though, is it? Let's face it.
No, I mean, I think it's worth considering, actually, that all political parties have these buses that go around the country. We all independently came to the same conclusion that this was a national expense. That was the clear guidance that came from Central Office to me in an email which said, this bus is arriving, it's a national expense. The only thing that I need to declare is the cost of the leaflets that they were distributing on the day, which we did. So it seems fairly clear that we all political parties understood this should be a national expense. The mistake, I think, was the hotel bills weren't declared nationally, but the cost of the coach was.
So you're saying basically that you did nothing wrong as far as the buses were concerned. Have the police spoken to you?
No, not at all. I've had an email which says where they're at, which pretty much what you've just sort of indicated. I think we need the Electoral Commission to give us a bit more guidance on how they see it and how they seem to be suggesting it might be a local expense, because if all political parties independently of each other have come to the same conclusion, that says to me that actually they've read the rules and all come to that decision that it should have been a national expense. So I think that's where we're at.
Well, as well as calling it a cock-up, Broxtowe MP Anna Soubry is at pains to say that she and her election agent have done nothing wrong, have nothing to hide, are happy to help with any investigation investigation. She said she was told from the outset that the expenses for the battle bus would be registered as national spending, which is what you're saying too, Mark. So cock-up or conspiracy here, Willie Bark? Is it really likely that parties would deliberately, and let's face it, rather publicly, do something like this to gain advantage? I mean, there's no secret about battle buses. You can't hide them.
It's not about battle buses at all. My party has already had, which used a small bus in the East Midlands, has already had that declared national by the Electoral Commission as a national spend. It's about the hotel accommodation. And if there are going to be police inquiries into that, I think it's best to say very little at this stage. Not for me to say whether it's cock-up or conspiracy. It's rather odd that it should have happened, but I'm not sure it's the greatest thing in the world.
Oh, well, Mark was implying that no parties are immune from this, really.
Well, we are immune from the accommodation. There's no question of the Labour Party being involved in not declaring accommodation expenses in hotels. There weren't any. And that's what this issue is about.
Okay.
And it's one for the Conservative Party to sort out with the Electoral Commission.
You can't tell me, Willie, that Ed Miliband didn't stay in a hotel at some point during the election campaign, and you clearly can't attribute that to the next seat that he visits the next day. You know, I think we have to recognise that that national campaign was the one that was delivering these coaches for all political parties, and that's where the expense should have been registered.
But why didn't you declare the hotels? That's what I can't understand.
Well, and that's the mistake, which the party central officers put their hands up and said we should have declared the hotels.
And there's obviously a lot more to be looked into on this, as the Electoral Commission has said.
But it did happen before too. I mean, there was the question of the Newark by-election,
yes,
of course, that we can't forget that happened a year or so before the general election, and I think that's probably still a current issue. But let's see what the result is before we all rush to judgment.
Okay.
I think there are muddy issues as well about the rules, about what is a local campaign, what is part of the national campaign, and I find it very confusing, really, just looking from the outside, because I think Channel 4 said that in Sherwood, people who came on the battle bus were being briefed about local issues before they spoke to people. Well, if that's against the rules, you sort of wonder why.
Are the rules out of date?
Well, I mean, I think clearly it's very difficult to allocate where those budgets go. So if the National Party puts up a big Vote Conservative poster in Sherwood, is that assisting my campaign? Well, clearly, because I'm a member of the party, you can gain some use out of it.
Because the party decided to draft in activists in this case, do you feel a bit let down by the party, by the National Party on this? Because you can't exactly turn around and say, do you know what, I don't want them coming into my patch. You wouldn't, would you? Let's face it.
And you're part of that big machine, and you accept the guidance which comes from the centre, and the guidance was very clear that this was part of the national expenditure, and that's where it sits. So, as Willie said, I think we need to wait and see what the Electoral Commission and the police come up with, and then we'll act appropriately.
I think there's a bigger issue here, of course. This is an issue for today, but there's a bigger issue around party funding that hasn't been sorted out yet, and it's really beyond time that it's sorted out.
Okay.
I think the worry is that much too much money is spent on our elections, and people are free to give huge donations.
What
that's something we have to sort out, and it's best done consensually. It's got to be done by the three parties working together on that.
Okay. Briefly, what next for this investigation, Tony?
Well, as you said earlier, we wait to see what the Electoral Commission decides to do.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.